Okay, so imagine this. You're a Lakota warrior. It's the 1870s. You've fought hard to claim the Black Hills.
Prime hunting grounds,
You're not
right?
teaming with buffalo and,
Yeah.
and all sorts of other resources.
Yeah.
And suddenly there are these whispers of gold
Oh.
spreading like wildfire, and a flood of prospectors
Yeah.
invade your land.
Driven by that devastating economic crash back east.
Exactly. It's like a pressure cooker about to boil over.
Yeah.
And that's the story we're going to unpack in this deep dive.
It's going to be a good one.
It really is. We're going to be focusing on the events leading up to the Battle of Little Bighorn,
Of course.
really focusing in on Custer.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Exactly. And how his life and actions really just kind of intertwined with this clash between American expansion and the Lakota way of life.
Yeah, it's really a story of two worlds colliding.
Exactly. And I think what's so fascinating is, we have Custer's personal writings for this.
Oh, wow.
We've got letters he exchanged, newspaper articles from that era, and even analysis from modern historians.
That's a lot to work with.
It's a lot to sift through, but I think it's going to give us a really rich understanding of this pivotal moment in history.
I think so, too.
So let's start with the Panic of 1873.
Yeah.
This wasn't just some abstract economic downturn.
No, not at all.
I mean, thousands were out-of-work, cities were in turmoil.
You can imagine, right? Like New York City, a quarter of the population suddenly jobless.
Wow.
It's a crisis.
And so it's no surprise that many looked westward, hoping to escape that hardship.
A land of opportunity, right?
Exactly. It's that idea of manifest destiny. But there's also this raw desperation pushing people towards the Black Hills.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about the Black Hills, it's important to understand the Lakota perspective.
Right.
It wasn't just about resources.
Although there were plenty.
The buffalo, the timber.
Yeah.
These lands represented their strength, their defiance.
Yeah, giving them up. It wouldn't just be a loss of resources.
Right.
It would be a deeply symbolic defeat.
And now let's bring Custer into the picture. He's already a Civil War hero, right?
Oh, yeah, very much so.
Known for his daring charges, his larger-than-life personality.
A bit of a showman.
But he's also a gambler, a womanizer, yet deeply devoted to his wife, Libby.
A complicated man.
A complicated man. And his writings reveal this fascinating kind of internal struggle between his admiration for the Lakota people,
Yeah.
but also his belief in the inevitability of their decline.
Right, and this is where those prevailing ideas of the time come in.
You mean like Darwinian theories?
Exactly. Survival of the fittest, all that.
And Custer, like many others, saw westward expansion as this natural progression.
Civilization triumphing over what they considered less advanced cultures.
It's chilling to read his words.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about the fading away of Native Americans.
Yeah.
Like it's a natural law. It's almost like foreshadowing what's to come.
Right, it's like he sees it as inevitable.
And this concept of species being superseded wasn't just happening in the American West.
Yeah.
I mean, this idea of certain cultures being destined for extinction.
Right.
It took root in Europe as well, and it led to some devastating consequences.
It's a dark chapter.
A very dark chapter.
Yeah.
But let's rewind to 1874 and the Black Hills expedition.
Okay.
Custer is tasked with scouting a location for a fort.
Right.
This is all happening after the Panic of 1873.
The nation needs a boost.
Exactly. They're desperate for something to lift spirits, boost the economy, and what does Custer stumble upon during this expedition?
Gold?
Or at least a hint of it, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a significant find, but it was enough to send shockwaves through a nation hungry for good news.
You can imagine.
And here's where the media comes into play.
Oh, yeah.
The newspapers, eager for a sensational story, blow this discovery out of proportion.
Classic.
And Custer, a master of self-promotion.
Of course.
He feeds into this frenzy. He confirms the existence of these vast gold deposits.
Even though the evidence is shaky.
Very shaky.
Yeah.
And this media-driven gold rush has immediate consequences.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Hordes of prospectors descend upon the Black Hills.
Driven by those dreams of striking it rich.
Right. And they pay little heed to Lakota land rights.
Oh, they don't.
And this fuels anger and resentment among the very people who call this land home.
It's a powder keg.
It is a powder keg waiting to explode.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to think about all these different forces at play.
Yeah.
A nation on edge after an economic crisis, the allure of gold, this clash of cultures.
That recipe for disaster.
It really is. And right in the middle of it all is President Grant.
Yeah.
And remember his peace policy.
Right.
It aimed to avoid war with Native Americans.
Encouraging assimilation instead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But with this gold rush and all this mounting pressure from the public, he's caught between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine the pressure he was under.
On one hand, he wants peace.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's this immense public pressure to deal with the so-called Indian problem.
Right.
And then you've got the economic anxieties and the potential windfall that gold could bring to a struggling nation.
Yeah. It's a tough spot to be in.
It is. And things get even more complicated when a government commission is sent to negotiate the purchase of the Black Hills.
Oh, yeah.
And they come back empty-handed.
Oggy-handed.
Their offer of $5 million was laughable.
Laughable. I mean, spotted tail.
A prominent Lakota leader.
Yeah. He demanded a price that would sustain his people for 7 generations.
I mean, that's a figure closer to $60 million.
Huge difference.
A colossal difference.
Yeah.
And it just highlights the chasm between the two sides.
They were worlds apart.
And the commission mostly made up of individuals who had little understanding of the Lakota.
Or the deep significance of the Black Hills.
Right. They come back advocating for a hardline approach.
Really?
They said cut off supplies to the reservations. Force the Lakota to accept whatever terms the government dictated.
Wow, that's a recipe for disaster.
It is. It's almost like they were intentionally trying to provoke a conflict.
It's hard to say for sure, but some historians argue that it was a deliberate strategy.
To force the Lakota into submission.
Exactly. Others believe it was just a gross miscalculation.
A failure to grasp the deep connection between the Lakota and their land.
Right?
So what about Grant? How did he respond to this advice?
Faced with all this pressure and the defiant Lakota nation,
Yeah.
he finds himself at a crossroads.
What does he do?
He calls a secret meeting with Generals Crook and Sheridan.
His most trusted military advisors.
Exactly. It's a pivotal moment, not just for the Lakota, but for Custer, too.
Because so.
Well, his destiny is about to become entwined with theirs.
We don't have a transcript of that meeting.
No.
But based on what we know of the players involved, it must have been intense.
Oh, yeah. High stakes.
What arguments were made?
Right.
What factors weighed most heavily on Grant's mind?
It's fascinating to think about.
It really is to speculate what happened behind closed doors.
And remember Custer's interest in fossils. His fascination with the idea of species rising and falling civilizations being superseded.
Right.
This Darwinian lens, so prevalent at the time,
Yeah.
it undoubtedly influenced the thinking of many involved,
Including Custer himself.
especially Custer.
It's almost as if the landscape of the West.
With its layers of fossils revealing extinct creatures,
Yeah.
it was feeding into this narrative of inevitable progress,
A justification for westward expansion.
a disturbing one,
Very disturbing.
but a convenient one nonetheless.
And this narrative, this ideology,
A dangerous ideology.
it wasn't confined to the American West.
No, not at all. It resonated across the globe.
Used to rationalize colonization exploitation.
Even genocide.
It's a sobering reminder of how scientific ideas can be twisted to serve harmful agendas.
Absolutely.
So here we have this convergence,
Yeah.
economic desperation, gold fever, a clash of cultures, and this dangerous ideology.
All swirling together on the Great Plains.
Like a perfect storm brewing.
It's hard not to wonder if any other outcome was even possible.
As we head towards Little Bighorn,
Yeah.
was war inevitable?
That's the question, isn't it?
Or could a different path have been forged?
Could things have gone differently?
So much tension, so much uncertainty. It's like you can almost feel it in the air.
Yeah, the weight of history pressing down.
And Grant, in that meeting room, he had to make a choice.
A choice with potentially devastating consequences.
And what did he decide?
Well, he decided to force the issue.
So the peace policy was off the table.
Essentially, yes. The Lakota were given a deadline to return to the reservations.
And if they refused,
The army would be deployed.
a deadline issued during the winter.
The harshest time of year.
It seems almost cruel, like a deliberate attempt to exploit their vulnerability.
It was a risky move. A gamble that the Lakota, weakened by the elements, would choose surrender over resistance.
And did they?
They did not. They refused to be intimidated. They saw this ultimatum for what it was, a blatant attempt to seize their land.
It's incredible they stood their ground,
It really is a testament to their courage and determination.
fighting for their survival, their way of life.
For their very identity.
And amidst all of this, Custer's about to step onto the stage.
Ready or not.
The media had been busy painting him as this fearless warrior.
Larger than life, a true American hero.
It's amazing how the media, even back then, could shape public perception.
Absolutely, the power of the press. It's a theme that echoes throughout history.
So Custer, with his reputation preceding him, marches towards this brewing conflict. What happens next?
Well, that's a story for another deep dive,
The Battle of Little Bighorn.
with all its complexities and controversies.
I'll have to unpack that another time. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you said earlier about whether war was inevitable.
Right.
Do you really think there was another way, another path that could have been taken?
It's a question that historians continue to debate. Could a deeper understanding of the Lakota perspective, a genuine commitment to diplomacy, could any of these have changed the course of events? It's impossible to know for sure.
It's a sobering thought, but maybe by understanding the mistakes of the past.
We can strive to do better in the present.
That's a powerful message to end on to our listeners. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of the American West. We've explored the economic anxieties, the allure of gold, the clash of cultures, the flawed ideologies, and the outsized personalities that all converged on the Great Plains. But the story doesn't end here. We'll be back with another deep dive dissecting the events of Little Bighorn itself, separating fact from fiction, and exploring the battle's enduring legacy. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deeper.